Hello and welcome back to News of the Week. Today I want to give you a little bit of an update on the newest information that I was able to gather regarding both commercial and residential real estate. Where are we really now that we are in the second half of the year? What is the latest information and what are we going to see going forward? So let's start with the commercial real estate information. And what's kind of interesting there is, and you have probably heard it in the news as well, in the traditional media, is that in commercial real estate, a lot of especially office buildings, but also in certain retail locations, but mainly anything that is used for office, for any kind of management and stuff, for any kind of consulting work, ranking and all that kind of stuff. We know and we are aware that we have this whole movement that seems to stick. I'm a big proponent of it, to work remote wherever that is possible. Now, if we go and understand, okay, a lot of people will probably, after having experienced remote work and working from home for now 3 years plus, to get them to come back and work in an office or in a cubicle will be very hard. And I am personally predicting that a lot of people will say, before I go back in working in the office, having to commute, having all the expenses for lunch and breakfast and stuff like that, I rather try to find another job. And if you think about it, in the past, you would have probably said, well, finding another job might not be that easy. But if you look in the labor market, we have as much employment as possible and still 10 million available jobs. Now, does that mean there is an alternative job for everybody? No, but it's also true that not everybody is literally working from home. So I think the notion to say an employer has the power to say, well, if you want to keep your paycheck, you have to work in the office and in the building is very low. Now, what does this mean to the data? About 3.5% of all the commercial real estate loans, meaning like somebody has a huge office building, they got a loan from the bank. These loans are obviously not as long as our investment residential real estate loans for 25 or 30 years. Those loans are typically 5 to 10 years. And a huge amount of those loans are coming due in the next 2 years. And why is that relevant? It's relevant because these loans were made with like 1 or 2% interest rate for like 5 years, 7 years, 10 years. Now they have to go with 5 or 6% interest rate. So the interest rate is like 4 or 5 times as high. But then the other thing is also, if you say, okay, well, I will not be able to convince the majority of my workforce to come back, so maybe you do hybrid work models or you do open plan work models. I've seen a whole bunch of really interesting ideas where employers say, well, we understand that you don't want to come to the office every day, but how about you come to the office Mondays and Fridays? Or how about we give you the flexibility to come 2 days a week? Or how about you come 3 days or 5 days or a certain number of days per month, but they need to be kind of spread out. You can't just say, I come the first week of the month and then don't show up for 3 weeks. So all these kind of things, but what they do for commercial real estate, which is very different, and that's why I wanted to start out our episode today with that, is what they do is they don't need as much space anymore. Not everybody needs a cubicle for 8 to 10 hours every day. So for one, about 3.5% of these loans are already very severely delinquent, meaning like there haven't been any payments for 60, 90 or more days. The other thing is not only are all these loans coming up for refi, but the people who were actually renting these spaces are going to say, well, now with this new model of how we work, we only need half the space, or we only need 40% of the space. So what they will try to do is to convince the owner of the building to change the lease agreement to a much smaller area. That also means there is lower rent, and the owner of the building will obviously try to raise the rent because they have to pay so much more on the interest and the financing. How many companies will accept a higher rent per square foot? That's debatable, but as soon as a landlord says, okay, I want to raise the rent because my costs have increased, the tenant side, the commercial side, the office user side, they will say, well, then we need to reduce our space even further. And instead of maybe 40, 50%, we are only going to rent 30 to 40%. I don't want to dive too deep into this. 35% to 50% of value loss has occurred to these buildings that used to be occupied by banks and insurance companies and all kinds of businesses that need a lot of office space. So that's that side. And I would always say, like, when we talk real estate and we are real estate investors, we want to keep an eye on the whole industry, but obviously our focus is on residential real estate. And I want to give you the latest data that I got on the 20th of July. And so what we find in residential real estate is, in a sense, and I don't want to brag, but in a sense, things coming true as I have predicted them at the end of last year and earlier this year. And that is the sale of residential real estate in comparison to June of last year, of 2022, in June of this year has gone down by 18.9%. Now you would say, oh, that's really bad, the market is crashing or stuff like that. The interesting thing is the median price, meaning like where half of the buildings are sold for less and half of the buildings are sold for more, that median price is still $410,000 per property, which means it's second highest to what it ever was for those that are being sold. Normally, when you say, okay, nobody wants to buy these buildings anymore, you would say, well, then the price has to come down. But that's not the case. And the interesting part is when you think about how much demand is there and how much is actually available in supply. Right now, the latest data shows that there are about 1 million properties available for sale, which equals about 3 months of inventory. And to have a balanced market, where you have about equality between supply and demand, would require 6 months inventory or about 2.5 to 3 million. So we are way, way, way low on inventory, and that is basically the issue. And why is the inventory so low? Because people who, let's say, live right now in a 5-bedroom, 3-bath, 2,500 square foot house, and the kids left, and they realize, well, we don't really need all the space and it's really hard to keep it clean and all that stuff. Maybe we should look for a smaller space, maybe a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house with 1,300 to 1,500 square feet. If you do that and you go and look for something at equal value in an equal location, because interest rates went from like 2 to 3% financing to right now above 7%, your smaller house costs you equal or probably more per month than the one that you're in. So what do people do? They say, well, why am I paying $3,000 for 1,200 or 1,500 square foot when I can pay $3,000 for 2,500 square feet? Nobody is that dumb, right? So that means these houses that people might even be interested to leave are not coming on the market, which results in low inventory. Now, one little silver sign on the horizon is that the new home builders are saying they see a lot of contracts being signed for new homes. And that is, in a sense, the hope of people who want to live in residential real estate, that interest rates will come down by the time these new homes are finished. Right? If you say, okay, I sign a contract right now and I know it takes 2 years until that house is done, so we're in 2025, you might be speculating to say, well, in 2025, my interest rate will not be 7% anymore. It will hopefully be 4.5%, and then I can afford it. Now, what we will have to see, and we will have more news of the week about this kind of stuff in the future, is to see, are interest rates really coming down, or are we getting into a situation where these new home builders have inventory, but it's still way too expensive for people to buy it? And will people then cancel their contracts? For now, the inventory is low. The median price is still 410,000. The number of sales are going down, but not because nobody is interested, but because there is just not that much to buy. And then on top of it, we're in the middle of the summer, everybody is under a heat wave and on and on and on. So that's the news, very different between commercial and residential. And I want to encourage you, that's kind of like my last message for this week, to really be very precise when you're listening to TV and the news and online and so forth. Is the information that you're getting really about residential real estate, or is it about commercial or some other real estate? Because for us, the residential is important, and there isn't a whole lot of news about it, because that's one of the few areas in the economy that's been holding up, that's been going fine, that wasn't influenced by inflation and all that kind of stuff, which is why we're doing it, right? So I hope you're doing well. I hope you're staying cool and you're enjoying the summer, and I talk to you next week. Be well and stay safe.